So right now I'm 58, just for reference, and set world records in multiple sports over the years. And I was probably rolling in around 280. I just wasn't feeling very good. You know, I was like, man, I've been doing this for 20 some years. As strong as can be.
Yeah, I can
But
tell.
it was just not something that I felt good anymore. And I think I was developing some metabolic disease. So I started this journey of let's just figure this out nutrition-wise. I pulled the trigger in 2016, eating only meat, and I was just like, damn, I feel really, really good. This is the best I've felt in years. I'm very skeptical. You know, I was like, where's all the fiber? What about vitamin C? All those things. And you know, to my surprise, everything worked really well. I convinced about 100 people to do it. We collected our data. The average person lost like 30 pounds in 90 days. They lost like 8 centimeters off their waist. Their resting heart rate went down. Every subjective metric, you know, sleep, digestion, joint pain, mental health, libido, all that got better for everybody. I think the population has to realize that, you know, you can't outsource your health to someone else. You can't outsource it to a pill or a physician. You gotta just embrace it yourself. And I think the fact that so many people are having success once they adopt this mindset, that it's like the moment you figured out about the money. You know, it's like, well, shit.
It's a huge problem. Yeah,
I'm not dependent upon this system, and you can step out of that.
We're here at Bitcoin 2025 in Las Vegas with none other than Dr. Shawn Baker, world record holding athlete, former Air Force surgeon, CEO of Rivera, and author of The Carnivore Diet. He's the leading voice in the fight for health sovereignty, a fierce critic of fiat food, and a passionate advocate for reclaiming both our bodies and our money through truth, simplicity, and proof of work. Welcome, my man.
Hey, man, appreciate having me here. I hear, I don't know, if Breedlove shows up, we're going to do a little push-up challenge. So we'll see what happens.
That'll be a funny. We got the Carnivore Diet. I don't know what diet Breedlove's on, but
he's been on Carnivore.
He's been on Carnivore as well? Okay,
he does mostly kind of an animal-based diet, so he has a little bit of, I don't know what else he puts in there. So
I was joking. I told you I'm on the seafood diet where I see food and I eat it, but I do work out hard. It's just, you know.
Seafood diet it's good for putting on weight and size. I did that for, like I said, I did that diet for 25 years, you know, but it catches up with you eventually.
That's how it feels, man. I'm kind of hitting that 30. I just turned 33, so kind of hitting that mark where it's like, oh, the weight, like it's kind of slowly fucking peaking up. I am strong. I work out hard, you know, put 3 or 4 plates on when I squat and whatnot, but you know, it is catching up. It is catching up. What do you think about all this conference? I mean, like, are you?
Man, I gotta tell you, I years ago, like Cypherpunk'd Amos got me started on Bitcoin. You know, we were going to write a Carnivore book together. And
he's a big believer in that as well.
Yeah, he is. And he ended up writing the Bitcoin Standard, and then I ended up writing the Carnivore diet myself. And I was at Bitcoin last year in Nashville, and this is, I think, quite a bit bigger, if I'm not mistaken. It seems that way. It's just it's a huge. I'm impressed at how. I guess this is proof of work in a way, isn't it?
It is,
It's just like you've got, what is it, 2.2 trillion market cap right now, and you've got just so many people excited about this. So I think the future just looks bright for both Bitcoin and for people discovering, you know, the problems with fiat food, if you want to go into that sort of discussion.
I spoke to some people that do a lot of conferences here, and they said that like they've never seen anything like this. Like they come to all the events in this convention center, and it's like 1/4 the amount of booths, and like instead here it's like jam-packed booth, so many companies, so many businesses, so much industry being built. And normally it's like there's like 20 booths and they're spread out from a mile apart from each other, and it's like they just said this is like absolutely insane. Have you been to any other Bitcoin conferences?
Well, like I said, I was just at the one at Nashville
last year, yeah.
And I think this is quite a bit bigger. I mean, I don't know for sure, but it just that impression, it does seem more over. Now, of course, we're in Vegas.
Did you ever go to the Miami ones?
I have not.
Those are my favorites.
Yeah,
I mean, because
maybe down the road if they still have those. Yeah.
Hopefully they'll bring one back eventually. Those are some great conferences. What was the moment that made you decide? You know, because obviously you said that you weren't always on the carnivore diet. You were a lot heavier. You were kind of telling me about your testimony and your journey. And I'm kind of reaching a point where I need to fucking make the decision in my life to like, you know, start getting my shit in check. I've been able to kind of just coast as an athlete. You were a former athlete. You know, when you're an athlete, you can just fucking eat whatever. You're busting your ass, working so hard, burning so many calories. What was the point where you're like, fuck, I got to make a change here?
So I was probably 42, 43. So right now I'm 58, just for reference. And I was, you know, like I said, I've been an athlete. I've set world records in multiple sports over the years. And I was probably rolling in around 280. I just wasn't feeling very good. I was
Yeah.
like, man, I've been doing this for 20 some years, as strong as can be.
Yeah. I
But
can tell.
it was just not something that I felt good anymore. And I think I was developing some metabolic disease.
Mhm.
So I started this journey of let's just figure this out nutrition wise. So I started low fat, lots of fiber, the typical thing that you're
Yeah.
told to eat. And I did lose weight. I mean, to be fair, I
Uh-huh.
lost weight that, but I felt friggin' miserable. I was
Really?
just hungry all the time. I was grouchy. I could just tell I wasn't meeting my needs. And the nurses at the hospital were like, man, we like the fat Dr. Baker way better because you're kind of an asshole at this point, right? So I didn't like I kind of widened my way through some of the low carb stuff, and that worked really well for me. I was on a ketogenic diet way
Uh-huh.
back in like 2010, 2011, and this is the first time I wasn't like hungry. Because as a big guy that would eat all the time, I
I
was
feel you, man.
always like, man, I just want to eat, 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 and that worked, for putting on weight, but
Uh-huh.
once I figured out that I didn't need to be hungry all the time, which was really a revelation for me, I started using it with my patients. Now, as a surgeon, I was replacing people's knees and
Uh-huh.
hips and shoulders and fixing their broken bones and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I would, we had a period of time where we had a lot of patients that were heavy, that were obese, that were
Yeah.
having complications around surgery. And so as a community, we came together and said, look, we're going to stop operating on these really heavy patients. Let's just get them to lose weight first.
Yeah.
They didn't give us any kind of like, this is how you do it. It was just like, figure out how to get your patients to lose weight.
Yeah.
I was putting my patients on low carb ketogenic diets at the time. And, not everybody would do it, of course, but of those that would do it,
Yeah.
very often they come back to me and they'd say, hey, doc, I know we have
Mm.
a knee replacement surgery scheduled in 2 months, but my knee doesn't hurt anymore.
Wow.
And that to me was a
Was
light
it?
bulb moment.
Yeah.
I was like, well, shit, if you don't need to do surgery, that's better. Even as a surgeon who makes a living doing surgery on people, I was like,
Yeah.
the right answer is let's get these people healthy. That's what started me. And then, then I met all these crazy people doing this called zero carb diet back. I think it was around
Hmm.
20, I want to say 2014, 2015. I pulled the trigger in 2016, eating only meat. And I was just like, damn, I feel really, really good. This is the best I've felt in years. I'm very skeptical. I
Hmm.
was like, where's all the fiber? What about vitamin C? All those things. And you know, to my surprise, everything worked really well. I convinced about 100 people to do it. We collected our data. The average person lost like 30 pounds in 90 days. They lost like 8 centimeters off their waist. Their resting heart rate
Wow.
went down. Every subjective metric, sleep, digestion, joint pain, mental health, libido, all that got better
Uh-huh.
for everybody. So then I was talking, this is back, like I said, 2017-ish. Rogan, Joe Rogan picked, as far as podcasts. Yep.
I just saw the podcast because Paul's like, oh,
Yeah.
here's some information about Dr. Shawn, and he sent it over, and I was like, wow, what a fascinating podcast. And
Yeah, this is the first one. So the
you
first one I go on, and Rogan's like looking at me like I got a third eyeball. I mean, he was like, "What the fuck, dude?" So I go on the second
takes a
time.
lot for Joe to look at you like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. When I go on the second time, and he's like, "Dude, man, all my friends that I put on this, it,
Yeah.
it works." So I mean, that's kind of the genesis of where I got to where I am now. And so
Uh-huh.
like, I mean, but my real interest is not so much, trying to get everybody to eat meat. I could care less what people eat. I mean, it's a good
Yeah.
tool. It's a therapeutic tool. I use it in clinical practice to put people's autoimmune disease in remission, put their
Yep.
diabetes in remission, have them lose weight, mental health gets better, all these types of things. So we founded a company, Rivera Health, where we have physicians in all 50 states
Uh-huh.
that basically take sick people and actually get them better instead of just dumping pills on 'em, which is, the
It's
problem.
I when I watched your podcast with Joe, it like you I guess you had a conflict with the hospital. They like basically said, "No, you can't do this." Like, what the fuck? I My dad's a physician,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
like the way I always tell him. I mean, he does he works out, he diets a little bit, but like my mom is like, she fucking doesn't do shit, so she's fucking depressed and all this, has all these fucking problems, and he's just fucking medicated. I'm like, fucking send her ass to the gym. I can't force her to do it. It's like it's crazy to see. How do you it's almost like nobody wants to fucking take the initiative to make themselves better. They just want the quick fucking fix. How do we fix this as a society? I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I mean, I
I
think
try everything I can to push my mom to like do shit.
one, I think we've gotten to this convenience society,
Yeah.
right? Fast food, convenient food. I
Yep.
mean, we replaced, actually cooking a meal with ripping open a package and shoving some food in our mouth. We have, in the medical side, at least on the allopathic side, we have wholeheartedly embraced pharmaceutical. It's a pill for every ill.
Yeah.
As a surgeon, I would be heal with steel. Surgical steel. We're going to cut it out. Cut it out, fix it, whatever. And I think that mindset has to change in the medical community. I think the population has to realize that, you can't outsource your health to someone else. You can't outsource it to a pill
Uh-huh.
or a physician. You got to just embrace it yourself. And I think the fact that so many people are having success once they adopt this mindset, that it's like, the moment you figured out about the money. It's like,
Yeah.
well, shit.
Yeah.
This is not.
It's
I'm
a
not.
huge problem. Yeah.
I'm not dependent upon this system, and you can step out of that. So I think we're making a difference. I mean, when I first started talking about this stuff specifically, 99.9999999, repeating, thought I was nuts, and now only like 99% of the people think I'm crazy. So you're making progress here. But
How do you like for me it's always like the logistical challenge. Like, my I told you my wife's uncle, he's a friend of mine. He's been fucking all about the carnivore diet. I'm gonna
yeah.
send him this video, he's gonna love it. But like it's the just the logistics of like you're out, you're busy, stuff's going on. Like how did you like lock into the mindset like, hey, I'm gonna fucking dedicate, I'm gonna do this, when you're out, what's the easiest trick,
Well, I
suggestion for
mean,
people?
I think first of all, you have to realize that, if you're trying to like sell somebody on a intervention. Like
Uh-huh.
carnivore diet, obviously very restrictive.
Yeah.
People are like, well, I can't. What about this and that? I miss all
Uh-huh.
these favorite foods, and
Uh-huh.
there's some reality to that. And so what I get people initially is like, look, let's just do it for 30 days, 90 days, 90 days optimally, because then most people are going to see a real benefit.
Uh-huh.
And then once they experience that, they experience how good it feels to be healthy and not be
Yeah.
tired, not have your joints hurt. And
Yep.
like
Yep.
I said, you're 33, I'm 58. The difference is enormous
Uh-huh.
on how you age.
Yeah.
And so I think particularly people that are already in pain, and that's most of the population, particularly over a certain age,
Yeah.
those are the easiest people, like your mom.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
probably doesn't feel very good.
No.
You get her to experience what real health feels like for even a couple weeks. That's really powerful. And like I said, with our company Rivera, we actually hold people's hand. I mean, we
Mm.
would contact them every day if we
Really?
need
Wow,
to.
that's
So
awesome.
so it's like I know that like coming down, like we have so much of this fiat addictive, hyperpalatable human pet food out there,
Uh-huh.
right? And this is what it
Human
is.
pet
No,
food.
it really is. I mean, it's
It's
literally
funny
a
that you
lot.
say
Our
that.
food supply, like I know that table full of candy over there.
I'm like, I don't what the fuck
Those
you guys
those
bring
are
over here?
those are literally like I mean,
That's his
literally
brother from Germany actually
those are
brought
like
that.
those are like recreational drugs. They
Yeah.
really are. These are
Yeah.
recreational drugs, and you have to treat them that way. And then
Uh-huh.
once you realize how much satiation you get from real food, and I'm not even talking about just carnivore. I mean, strict carnivore works for a lot of people. It's necessary for a lot of people. But I mean,
Mhm.
just stepping away from that stuff is really, really hard because it's addictive, it's cheap, it's
Yeah.
hyper palatable, it is everywhere, it is encouraged by everyone.
Yeah.
We have a huge, we have multi-billion-dollar marketing systems that push us to eat that stuff, and we've kind of gotten so used to it. This is a modern phenomenon. If we roll the clock back even 50 to 100 years,
That
99% of that
it
stuff
doesn't even
doesn't even
exist. Well,
exist.
you look at society 56 years ago, you go
Yeah.
to look at the beach, everybody's skinnier, it's kind of like
You didn't have an
it's
option, right? You
there's
didn't have
just
an
not that
option. Now
option. Yeah.
we're suffering from a problem of too much excess, which is what we have. So this stuff, like birthday cakes, would have been eaten on your birthday.
Yeah.
Now we eat birthday cake
Just every
three
day.
meals a day.
Yeah.
Basically, where's my dessert after every meal?
It's unbelievable. I saw an X the other day. You mentioned like people heavier when you're doing surgeries and stuff. Did you see the picture and image of like an obese person and a skinny person and the skeleton?
Yeah.
It's like exactly the same, but like there's just all this excess weight on somebody that's super
Yeah, I mean,
obese.
as a surgeon, it's
Yeah.
it's technically more challenging to operate on particularly a morbidly obese person. I mean, I remember I can tell you a funny story. When I was in my residency, this is
Uh-huh.
years and years ago. I remember we had this gal, big old gal. She was like 550, and she'd broken her femur. And I remember I walk in the room, she goes, "Man, you think you can handle me?" And I'm like, "Man, lady, if I can, no one can." And I remember we got in there, and I
Oh
remember I
my
was I was still
God.
a resident, so I called the attending surgeon. I said, "Hey, look, it's like midnight." And I said, "Hey, man," I said, "Pat, we got a lady with a broken femur. It's real big. Do you want to do her?" And he goes, "Yeah, we got to do her tonight." And I remember we got her in the OR, and the
Uh-huh.
anesthesiologists are freaking out because they're like, we don't want to put her to sleep
Yeah.
because
Fuck, she might
we
never
may
wake
not be
up.
able to extubate her.
Yeah.
So they do a spinal on her, and they get the OB-GYN docs because they're experts at anesthesia docs that they're experts at doing spinals on all the time. That's all they do. And we get her prepped out, and it's like we have to put extenders on the tables, and we got her feet on chairs, And I remember the attendant walks in, his eyes just get so wide. He's like, "Holy shit!" So yeah, it's
Oh man.
challenging. I mean, there's special instrumentation that you have and that stuff, but it'll take a simple surgery that takes 30 minutes and turn it into a complicated 3-hour ordeal, and that's more anesthesia time, that's more risk for infection. That's I mean, all these things, these variables. So it's a real problem, across the board.
What are your thoughts on meat that's n- I guess what they call it lab made meat, where you don't actually have to kill the animals. Where do you stand on that? I'm kind of like, m- I want to hear your take first,
Yeah,
and I
so I
guess I can
mean,
tell you
first of
mine.
all, this is a venture capital Silicon Valley
Uh
sort of pipe dream that is blowing up. It's not likely to be successful. Now with lab grown meat, you take these cells from a, cow, whatever, chicken, whatever it's gonna be, but specifically with a cow. So now you have to nourish that cell
huh.
in a petri dish, and then the ultimate goal is to get in these huge, 50 million gallon bioreactors so you can produce
Yeah.
the appropriate quantity. But the steps to go from the petri dish to those giant reactors, some people estimate it takes like something like 150 successfully larger reactors,
Uh huh.
because you can't just go from a little bit to these giant things. And not only that, you have to feed these cells. They don't just
Yeah.
grow out of air. So you got to, what do you feed them? Well, you feed them these solutions of glucose and proteins. Where do you get those glucose and proteins? Monocrop agriculture. You got to get all this pea protein and all this stuff to
Uh
put in
huh.
there. So to grow the food to feed the cells, you're destroying a whole ecosystem. You're killing all these animals. So it's not like, oh, there's no animals dying to produce this food. It's the same argument that the vegans had. Well, if I just eat soybeans, everything's great. Well, you're literally com- committing ecocide. You're destroying entire ecosystems. Every worm, bug, bird, bee, rabbit that lives in these fields is wiped out
Hmm.
to support this monoculture. So the same thing's happening with these things. And in fact, the few studies that have been done looking at the environmental impact on these lab-grown meats show that they are up to 5 to 25 times more, damaging to the environment. So it's not a solution.
Interesting. I haven't heard that argument. Are you so you think that you just think it's pipe dream pretty much? It's not
Pretty
gonna.
much. Yeah,
So
I think there's going to be like some niche restaurants that'll sell
uh
it
huh.
to some people that want to spend, $100 a pound for a simulated burger.
Interesting.
I don't think
Interesting.
it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna pan out. I think in fact, most of these companies are going under. If you look at the history,
Mm.
most of them are failing.
Uh-huh.
The Silicon Valley money that was there 5, 10 years ago, it's drying
Do you
up.
listen to the All In pod guys? I know. I think it's. I want to say it's David Friedberg who's has a company that he's working on with this, and other guys are kind of saying what you're saying, but he's like, "Do you listen to the All In podcast where it's
I
like
have not,
four
but I
VCs?
mean, but
It's
I
a pretty
mean,
good pod."
but I mean, basically, the only people that are investing in this right now are governments,
Yeah, I think.
because they have a sort of ideologic belief on this. But the
Yeah.
actual smart money, the guys are like,
Mhm.
"What's my ROI going to be in this?" They're like, "F this, it's not going to work." So I
What
think
about scientifically, like that? If they do succeed in some way, like to me, like the argument of having like like if you can make the meat taste, if it's healthy, nutritious, and tastes exactly the same, and you can clone like a A5 Wagyu or whatever, like, do you what do you
so.
think?
Again, I think that theoretically,
Uh huh.
and depend. And again, we don't have the long-term data, because what they'll do is they won't try to make the same thing. They'll try to make it less saturated fat because they're
Uh
worried
huh.
about saturated fat. So they're going
Yeah,
to monkey with the
they're
fats.
gonna monkey with it. Yeah.
So I think it's the other thing is this sort of clone meat has
Uh huh.
this sort of immortal cellular line, like we have breast cancer cells
Uh huh.
that go back to the 1960s, and we keep cloning them over and over
Uh
and
huh.
again. So this is almost very similar to eating basically meat that's turned into cancer, in many ways. And
Hmm.
so what happens genetically to it? Does it have these mutations that occur? What happens when we eat this stuff?
Yeah, I
We
guess
don't
that's
really know.
yeah,
So
that's a good point. I
I
think the
personally,
jury's still out
I'm,
on
I'm
that.
not going to sign up to be the guinea pig
To
to
be
do
the
this
guinea
stuff.
pig, yeah.
If you want to do it, good for you. We'll see what happens in
Well,
20, 30
I
years.
don't know if I want to be the guinea pig, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you know, if
I,
if it all works out and it's actually nutritious and healthy, and
well, I
it's
mean,
not
again,
an animal that's been shot up with all these hormones they're shooting up in these animals, and it's like made without all that, maybe you know what I mean. Like, I'm not opposed to it. I just want to see the science first. That's
yeah,
kind of how I
I
feel. I want
think
to see the data.
you have to look at the actual data versus
Yeah.
the hype and the propaganda, because you have to realize the meat industry worldwide is about a $1.5 trillion industry.
Uh huh.
So if you can take you skim off the top, you take 10% of that, it's $150 billion. That's worthwhile
Yeah.
if you can get that market. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of obviously marketing hype
Yeah.
and that type of stuff around
I
there. So
I am sympathetic to the argument of the suffering of the animals.
sure,
So,
sure.
you know, I was in Texas to look at a Bitcoin mining operation, I think maybe like 2 months ago. And like we drove by this fucking just slaughterhouse and you could fucking just smell it from like a mile, 2 miles away. And it was just like kind of like, whoa,
Yeah,
like
no,
kind of
there's
sad,
definitely it definitely
you
has
know?
a flavor to it, yeah, a smell
Yeah.
to it. But I mean, if you look at like, let's just look at like cows, for instance, because I'm
Uh-huh.
obviously an advocate of beef. The average cow that's born in domestication,
Uh-huh.
98% of them are going to make it to adulthood. Most of them are going to live about 2 years, right?
Uh-huh.
Which is like, okay, that's not their full lifespan if they're in the wild. Well, not really. If you look at what happens to them in the wild, like there's been studies, University of Pennsylvania did a study on
Hmm.
like other ruminant animals, particularly like deer, you know,
Hmm.
and they found that the average deer only about 47% actually make it beyond about 32 weeks. Most of
Wow.
them die of starvation, predation, or injury or disease. So most of these animals live a much better life than they could afford in the wild. So if we're looking about
That's an interesting ethical argument.
animal suffering
Uh-huh.
or animal welfare, I mean, the ranchers, even though they live 2 years as opposed to 10, they are free of predation. They're free of disease.
Uh-huh.
They're fed every day. They're watered every day. So they got a pretty good life.
Hmm.
And in exchange, they turn into food for us. And so it's kind of like this sort of argument. If you
Yeah.
realize that what happens to you and I when we die? We turn into food.
Yeah, we turn
We're going
into
to turn into food.
yep.
We're all food. We're going to be eaten by worms,
We go back
microbes,
to the cycle of
unless
life.
we get cremated or something like that. But and even then, some of that turns
Mhm.
into food.
Interesting.
So I mean, I think the reality is if you think about it from a real ethical and moral standpoint, we are in many cases giving these animals a better. Now, I would argue like things like broiler chickens, where they plump them up in 5 weeks and slaughter them.
Yeah.
Their life expectancy is less. The quality of life is certainly worse.
Hmm.
So I think it's nuanced. It's not as straightforward that all animal agriculture
Yeah.
is bad and some's better than others. So yeah,
Interesting. Very interesting thought. I haven't gone down this rabbit hole. Speaking of studies, when I listened to your podcast with Rogan, you were talking about like a cholesterol study that was still being done. What
yeah,
did that ever
yeah,
finish? Can
yeah,
you
yeah.
talk to me about
No,
that?
no, it's still it's there. It's a multi-phase study, and basically what we see, and one of the big criticisms in general on low carb diets is
Hmm.
some people, when they go on a very low carb diet, their cholesterol goes up quite high. And the concern is that a concern for heart cardiovascular disease? And the reason that we're seeing that people see high cholesterol is not because they're eating lots of saturated fat. The real reason is they become lean. And a lean person on a low carb diet has a physiological tendency to drive up traffic of lipids in their blood. So what happens is your liver is where our energy comes from. We eat food, our liver processes it, and then it sends it out to the cells in our body. Well, if there's very little carbohydrate stores in our liver says, well, the cells are hungry. What are we going to traffic? We've got fat available. We're going to use our own body fat, cycle it, put it into lipoproteins, and then traffic it out. And so we see elevations in the cholesterol associated with that. Now, the question is, does that translate into increased risk for cardiovascular disease? And the answer is it really depends. There's a lot of nuance there. If you are generally metabolically healthy, you don't have cardiovascular disease already, this recent study seems to show that probably you're not increasing your risk significantly for cardiovascular disease. Now, if you already have cardiovascular disease, that's a different story. So again, it becomes nuanced. Now, I think the problem we have with medicine is we kind of lump everybody in the same situation. We do
Yeah.
population medicine. On average,
Uh-huh.
it makes sense to lower cholesterol for the average person. If you're in a particular subset, then that answer becomes more nuanced.
Yeah. That's interesting. My dad often talks about that as a physician where it's like, he's got you almost become like a large language model in your head when you see a certain patient. I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe you experience this where like, hey, there's this person's this ethnicity, this weight, or they're this sex, and like you kind of just like their genetics might look like this, and you kind of just get a feel for what medications or what things you can prescribe or how you can treat that patient. Is this kind of similar to that in a
Yeah,
way?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think
Okay.
there's obviously some patients are going to respond better to different therapies than others, and
Yeah.
it's lifestyle, it's genetics, it's
Uh-huh.
where they are, what other comorbidities they have, and so medicine at at its ultimate level, and this is what's happening. I mean, we're going to see a lot of medicine, a lot of the tasks in medicine, a lot of the decision making being replaced by AI.
Yeah.
This is happening.
It is happening. Yeah.
And the unfortunate aspect of that is, a lot of that AI is going to be driven by the pharmaceutical companies. And so what will happen is Like, let's say you don't feel very good. So instead of going to the doctor, you'll go to the computer,
Uh-huh.
and they'll be able to scan you, and they'll be able to diagnose you, and they'll
Uh-huh.
be able to prescribe your drugs, because there's legislation right now in the House of Representatives saying that AI should have a medical license. That is going to be a big step, because
Yeah.
what will most people do? Most people don't want to go to the doctor's office, right?
Yeah.
You got to make an appointment. Maybe they're booked up for
Yeah.
the next two
Yeah, 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 yeah,
months.
yeah, that's
You got to
common.
wait. You got to sit in the waiting room. You got to
Yeah.
put your clothes on.
Mm.
What if you could just turn on the computer, put your finger in a little scanner, and it can diagnose you and do everything a doctor can?
Yeah.
Most people are going to sign up for
I
that,
mean, it
right?
just makes sense. It's
Right.
economically
So
more
what'll
feasible.
happen is more people will become medicated,
Uh-huh.
right? Which again, we're kicking the problem down the curve. If you just medicate everybody and you just symptomly or you just medicate their symptoms,
Yeah.
you're
Dealing with the root
not
cause,
actually
no
dealing
doubt.
with the root cause.
I mean, that
Right.
is literally our medical system today. I mean,
Correct.
that's what do you like? What do you think about everything that's happening with RFK Jr. And I mean,
Well, I think he's well intentioned. I think he's realizing if he probably already knows what he's up against. He's up
yeah,
against a multi-trillion-dollar industry
uh-huh,
and just an entire ecosystem of we make profits off of sick people, and they don't want that to go
yeah,
away because that's their business model.
uh-huh,
So there are going to be people that are going to fight him every step of the way. It's like people are talking. They're celebrating titanium dioxide is no longer in Skittles.
yeah,
I'm like, that's great, but it's not going to solve the issue. It's not like people eating non-titanium dioxide Skittles are going to be suddenly magically turned into these
Did you see
healthy
the
people.
you see like the Coke people that came to like I can't, it was like a congressional
Texas,
meeting or
yeah,
whatever it
it was
was.
in Texas,
They're
yeah.
like, arguing about why Coke should be on the SNAP program or
Yeah, that
whatever.
was in Texas.
So
Yeah, yeah,
somebody's like,
absolutely.
we didn't put you in power to deal with nutrition or whatever it is, and he's like, it's literally called the supplemental nutrition whatever program.
Right, assistance program,
Assistance
correct. Yeah.
program was classic. I mean, that just seems like such a no-brainer. Why are we why are we giving subsidies to subsidize people being unhealthy? I mean, like if you need like you can't afford your food or whatever, why would we feed you poison and garbage, which will just exacerbate the problem onto the rest of society for longer? I mean, it's like a no-brainer in my
Yeah, I
mind.
mean, if we look at like for instance, a lot of the chronic disease and a lot of the acute disease, a lot. If you go to most emergencies rooms, much of the emergency room resources are spent on people with chronic disease coming in with acute exacerbation. So the diabetic goes into DKA,
Yeah.
the COPD guy goes into a respiratory crisis, and those things are very very expensive. I mean, we're talking, like there's people that become frequent flyers. They come into the ER every weekend. Every weekend they're back in the ER because they can't manage their
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and those people cost disproportionately cost a majority of the healthcare expenditures.
Mm.
So if you could just literally take those people and feed them a good diet, even if you had to pay for it,
Yeah.
you would dramatically decrease healthcare costs.
I mean, it's unbelievable how much money would be saved because most people don't pay anyway. I mean, they come in and just abuse the system, you know. Uh, It just the whole thing is just mind blowing to me. It's like you've got a problem, you create a bigger problem, and then just the taxpayer pays for the bigger price. Like, come on, we could solve this right here, right now. It's so the inefficiencies are just like unbelievable with all that.
Well, I mean,
Crazy.
and the problem is for instance, like health insurance. Now, this is interesting. I didn't realize this,
Uh huh.
but according, after the Affordable Care Act came in, there was a cap on how much an insurance company could make on their on collecting their premiums. So they said 15%. So people pay their
Uh
premiums.
huh.
We make profit on 15% of that. Well, how do we make more profit? We make the premiums more expensive, right? We make healthcare more
Of
expensive.
course, that's what
So the
always
more
happens. That's what
expensive
happens
the
when you
healthcare
socialize
is,
anything.
right, the more they're incentivized
Yeah.
to jack it up. So the health
Yeah.
insurance companies, which should be a governor on healthcare prices, are actually incentivized to do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So it's the incentives are completely perverse.
Of
It's all
course.
this whole fiat
Show me
system,
the
right?
incentives and I'll show you the outcome. I mean, it is
Yeah,
my absolute favorite quote right now
right.
because it is so true no matter what industry, no matter what you're looking at. Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome. If you it's the whole like you said, the whole fiat system, right?
So
If you incentivize
yeah.
constant spending and all this, you get like you said, a fast food lifestyle, all this garbage, poison. I mean, it just
Yeah,
it all
so when
comes
it comes to
together.
healthcare, we need to incentivize physicians to actually heal patients.
I agree with you.
And that's what I'm doing in my company, and I think that's what we need to do. And hopefully, we'll get the support. Hopefully, we'll get the government support. If not, hopefully, we get the support of the people, because the Make America Healthy thing is only going to happen if
Uh-huh.
enough Americans say, "Look, I'm not going to eat this poison anymore. I'm not going to be taking these pills all the time. We have to get that mindset out there. And if we can do that, you can change the market. And the same thing with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
People are waking up to Bitcoin. They're
Yeah.
saying, look, we're going to step away from, we don't want this central digital bank scam
Yeah.
system coming on anytime soon. So we're going to force the issue.
Tell me a little bit about Rivero before we close out here.
Yeah.
And
So
how can
we're,
people get
yeah, like,
involved? How can we
yeah.
help?
So we are a digital health company. We
Okay.
treat people with autoimmune disease, diabetes, metabolic disease, obesity, inflammatory diseases. We're in all 50 states. It's all digital. So basically, our average customer spends about 6 months with us. But during that time, we
Uh-huh.
basically, our goal is to cure them, not to medicate them for the rest of their life. And so our patients, they graduate from our system.
Yeah.
It's not a particularly good business model, to be honest, but
Yeah.
it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so we are. We started last year. We started seeing our first patients in Texas and Florida. We're now in all 50 states. We're actually about to do a funding round so we can scale to
Really?
significant. We're actually going to be likely taking some people some Bitcoin, so that'll
All
hopefully make
right.
some people
Hell yeah.
happy. Yeah.
Well, how can I what should I tell my dad who's a physician? He is part of a practice. They recently actually just absorbed or they expanded with orthopedics, but they're a neurology place. Can they get involved here? What could they do?
So what a lot of our physicians do is they work part-time for us. They do
Okay.
their normal practice, and
Okay.
then when they want to actually cure patients, they enjoy it. It's like I talk to the patients, they say they love working in our system
Okay.
because patients actually get healthy and they're cured.
So they could do both essentially?
Yeah, sure,
All
sure.
right.
They
Hell yeah.
absolutely
That
can.
sounds
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I'm going to pass along the information and
Awesome.
hopefully get
Yeah.
him involved.
He's in Florida.
He's in Florida.
Well, we got some good Florida docs. Yeah.
All right, Doc. Well, thank you
Man,
so much for this
thanks, man.
conversation.
Man,
Appreciate it,
appreciate it,
brother. It
brother.
was a great
All
conversation.
right.